It didn't begin with a shout. It began with a calm voice, measured, restrained, almost boring. And that's the danger, because authoritarian erosion never announces itself with sirens. It walks in wearing a suit, carrying a resume, speaking in the language of duty. Today wasn't about a man defending his career. It was about the state of American law staring down the abyss and calmly explaining why it still matters. Strip away the political theater, and you're left with a single, chilling fact. A former president of the United States is accused of trying to overturn an election he lost and hoarding national defense secrets like personal souvenirs. Not alleged in whispers, charged, indicted by grand juries, twice, in different jurisdictions, after months of evidence review. And instead of grappling with that reality, half the political ecosystem has decided the real crime is that the law was enforced at all. The room may have looked ordinary, but the moment was not. A career prosecutor sat before lawmakers and explained something that should not need explaining in a functioning democracy: that laws apply even when the defendant is powerful, famous, or politically useful. That statement alone now qualifies as controversial. That's how far the baseline has shifted. This wasn't a partisan rant. It was a recitation of facts, years of service, Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, domestic violence cases, election crimes, war crimes, the boring grind of law. And that's precisely why this testimony matters. Because authoritarians don't dismantle democracy by rejecting law outright. They do it by convincing the public that law is optional for some and weaponized against others. The evidence didn't emerge overnight. It didn't come from social media speculation or opposition research. It came from documents, from witnesses, from sworn testimony, from surveillance footage, from text messages, from classified markings visible to the naked eye. It came from reality. And reality is stubborn, even when people in power want it buried. The election wasn't overturned, but that wasn't for lack of effort. Pressure campaigns, fake electors, coercion of state officials, public lies amplified by private desperation. The goal was simple: stop the lawful transfer of power. That phrase should land like a thunderclap. Because peaceful transfer of power is not a tradition, it is the central operating system of democracy. Without it, everything else is performance. And when that failed, the behavior didn't correct itself. It escalated. Boxes of classified material moved from secure facilities to a private resort. Stored not in vaults, not under guard, but in ballrooms, bathrooms, hallways. National defense information treated like clutter. Requests to return it ignored. Subpoenas defied. Lawyers misled. Surveillance footage allegedly tampered with. This is not negligence. This is obstruction. The law does not require intent to harm the country. It requires willful violation. And the evidence, as described under oath, meets that standard over and over again, beyond a reasonable doubt. Those words are not rhetorical. They are legal thresholds, and they were crossed. The response from the accused wasn't reflection or accountability. It was vengeance, threats, smears, calls for retribution against prosecutors, agents, clerks, people whose only crime was doing their jobs. This is textbook authoritarian behavior. Attack the institution, intimidate the enforcers, poison the public against neutral arbiters of fact. This is where pattern recognition becomes unavoidable. Every strongman playbook looks the same. First, discredit elections, then delegitimize courts, then demonize civil servants, then promise revenge, and finally, claim only one person can restore order. History is screaming, and too many are pretending they can't hear it. The Constitution doesn't enforce itself. That's not poetry, that's reality. It relies on people willing to absorb personal cost to uphold it. Prosecutors who know they'll be attacked, judges who know they'll be threatened, election workers who know they'll be harassed. When that willingness collapses, the system collapses with it. There is no exemption clause for former presidents. There is no carve-out for political inconvenience. The oath is not symbolic. It binds, and violating it has consequences, or at least it's supposed to. What makes this moment uniquely dangerous is not just the alleged crimes. It's the normalization of the response to accountability. Millions have been conditioned to believe that enforcement itself is tyranny, that evidence is persecution, that juries are deep state actors, that law is legitimate only when it benefits their side. That is how democracies rot from the inside. This is not about liking or disliking a man. It's about whether the country still believes in rules that apply universally. Because once exceptions are carved for power, they don't stop expanding. They metastasize. Today it's classified documents. Tomorrow it's elections. The day after that, it's speech. The testimony wasn't dramatic because it didn't need to be. The drama is in the implications. A former president allegedly attempted to override the will of voters and retain sensitive secrets, then mobilized a movement to punish those who enforced the law. That is not politics as usual. That is a constitutional stress test. And here's the quiet part too many are afraid to say: the system barely held. It held because enough people at critical moments refused to break. State officials who wouldn't find votes, judges who rejected nonsense claims, prosecutors who followed evidence instead of fear. But barely holding is not the same as being healthy. This is why the fixation on motives is a distraction. It doesn't matter whether the prosecutor voted red or blue. The law doesn't ask. It asks whether the statute was violated, whether the evidence supports charges, whether a jury should decide. That's it. Everything else is noise designed to exhaust the public into apathy. The insistence that accountability is divisive is one of the oldest tricks in the book. Justice is always divisive to those who benefited from impunity. Stability built on silence is not stability. It's decay. What we are watching is not the criminalization of politics. It is the politicization of crime. And the difference matters. One is authoritarian, the other is law enforcement. There is a reason autocrats obsess over loyalty, because loyalty replaces law. Loyalty demands silence. Loyalty demands denial. Loyalty demands that reality bend. And when reality refuses, it must be attacked. This moment will be studied, not because of the theatrics, but because of the choice it presents. Either the country reaffirms that no one is above the law, or it formally abandons that principle while pretending otherwise. There is no middle ground. The cost of enforcement is visible. Threats, careers destroyed, families targeted. But the cost of non-enforcement is far higher. It teaches future leaders that rules are optional if you can mobilize enough outrage, that elections are suggestions, that power is possession, not permission. The testimony ended with gratitude, not triumph. Gratitude for colleagues, for advice, for service. That tone matters. Because this was never about winning. It was about doing the job knowing the price would come due later. And now the price is being demanded from the public. Attention, discernment, memory. Because authoritarian movements rely on fatigue. They want you tired, confused, cynical. They want you to believe everything is corrupt, so nothing is worth defending. But the law is not an abstraction. It's people choosing restraint over rage, process over impulse, accountability over loyalty. And those choices are being tested in real time. This is the part of history where future generations ask whether the warning signs were obvious. They were. They are. The question is whether enough people refuse to look away. If you want to understand what's happening, you have to stay engaged. Not emotionally whipped up, but mentally alert. Authoritarianism thrives in gaps of attention. The moment you stop watching, it advances. Stay present. Stay informed. Because missing this moment means missing the warning signs that come next.